The Alaska State Poetry Out Loud competition is made possible by the Alaska State Council on the Arts, the Juneau Arts and Humanities Council, the National Endowment for the Arts, and the Poetry Foundation.
Welcome. My name is Nancy D. Cherney. I'm the Executive Director of the Juneau Arts and Humanities Council. Please join me in gratefully acknowledging that we are on the unceded territories of the Akwaan in Tlingit Ani. We are grateful and thankful for their care and stewardship of these lands and waters through the centuries and are honored to bring this presentation to you from this land. So deeply tied to the traditional culture and ways of the Tlingit, we hope this program honors that heritage. It has been my privilege to help the Alaska State Council on the Arts bring this national scholarship opportunity to Alaskan students for over 15 years. In previous years, all the finalists would be here in Juneau, and we are happy that thanks to the magic of technology, and particularly with the help of KTOO, we have been able to carry on virtually. In fact, our experience in making poetry out loud work in Alaska across great distances through the years helped us help other states manage in these past 2 years. We know how to do distance. And our Poetry Out Loud program has adapted to make sure Alaskan students continue to have this great opportunity. Be prepared to be inspired. It is my privilege now to introduce Ben Brown, the chairman of the Alaska State Council on the Arts, to welcome you all and begin the evening's viewing of the amazing and powerful poetry recitations. Congratulations to the students, and please welcome Ben Brown.
Good evening, everyone, fellow Alaskans and those watching around the world. And thank you very much to my dear friend Nancy D. Cherney for that very kind recorded introduction. As Nancy mentioned, COVID has taught us how to do things a little differently, and we are still varying our ways this year. So I'm here live in the KTOO studios in Juneau, Alaska's capital city, and we're joined live by student participants, coaches, supporters, and other friends of poetry and the arts around Alaska via Zoom. So hello, everyone. This year's Alaska State Poetry Out Loud competition was done using recorded video recitations, and the judging took place yesterday here in Juneau at the Andrew P. Kashivaroff building, which is the headquarters of the State Library, Museum, and Archives. Tonight, we'll see all of the student recitations, hear from the judges, and announce the winners right at the end of the show. Before we get into the proceedings for Poetry Out Loud, I want to say just a few things about the Alaska State Council on the Arts. We are Alaska's state arts agency, and about as long as I've been alive here on the last frontier, we've been helping increase opportunities for Alaskans to have arts and culture in their lives every single day. Poetry Out Loud is one of many programs that we offer thanks to our wonderful, dedicated, small, and talented and hardworking staff who are headquartered in Anchorage. One thing you should know about right now is we rely on our friends in the legislature not only to make a modest appropriation that triggers a matching grant from the National Endowment for the Arts, and then significant investment by our foundation partners like the Rasmussen Foundation and Margaret A. Cargill Philanthropies, but we also have a piece of legislation that's making its way through the legislature this session. Senate Bill 71 will make some important changes, particularly with our very popular Alaska Artistic License Program. So if you go to actleg.gov and look up Senate Bill 71, you can learn more about this bill, which we very much support at the State Council on the Arts, and see if there's anything you can do to help your elected senators and representatives make sure it becomes law this session. So back to Poetry Out Loud. Around the country for the past 2 years, states and jurisdictions have adapted and pivoted and persevered within the rules and guidelines of the National Poetry Out Loud recitation competition. So we send our good wishes from here in Alaska to students all across the nation who are now participating in Poetry Out Loud. By the end of tonight's broadcast, one of our 12 Alaska State finalists will advance to the national competition this spring. But I want to offer my personal congratulations on behalf of the State Council on the Arts to all the regional and state finalists for Alaska Poetry Out Loud, and wish best of luck to the 12 students whose recitations you will hear tonight. So before we go into the actual recitations, I'd like to share the rules of the Poetry Out Loud competition with you. The video recitations submitted by our state finalists are selected from a Poetry Out Loud anthology, which you can find online at poetryoutloud.org. Each year here in Alaska, we gather a panel of adjudicators who must consider the poetry recitations from the Alaska Poetry Out Loud competitors against the specific criteria provided by the National Poetry Out Loud program. In 2022, our judges for the Alaska State Poetry Out Loud competition are Heather Lendy from Haines, Ingvild Vatngatu from Anchorage, and Vivian Meldy, also from Anchorage, and from here in Juneau, Leslie Ishii and Bridget Lujan. This year's scorekeeper is Amanda Filori of Juneau, who is also the Poetry Out Loud coordinator for Alaska, and without whom we could not make this program work. We'll have a chance to hear from some of those judges later in the broadcast. So, the specific rules I mentioned a moment ago of the Poetry Out Loud competition. Only currently enrolled high school students in grades 9 through 12 are eligible, with an exception made for 8th grade students participating in a 9th through 12th grade class. A student may not advance to state finals without having competed in a lower level competition. Schools or regions must hold a competition of at least 2 students to select their champion. If that champion is not able to attend the next level of the competition, a runner-up is sent. Students have to be judged according to the Poetry Out Loud evaluation criteria from the national program. The state and national rounds consist of 3 rounds of competition. Competitions at the lower levels may have fewer rounds, but students must recite only 1 poem in each round. The order in which the poems are recited is up to the student. Competition organizers may not dictate the order of the poems to the students. Rankings are based solely on evaluation sheets submitted by judges, and the judges do not convene to discuss performances during the competition, and the judges do not reconsider the scores once they're submitted. Scoring is cumulative. The scores from all rounds are added together to determine the ultimate winner. In the event of a tie, the tied student with the highest overall performance score should win. If that also results in a tie, look to the highest accuracy score. So performance and accuracy are 2 separate categories of scoring. And finally, students are not allowed to use props or wear costumes during their recitations. We love theater, but this is a poetry recitation contest. All poems have to come from the Poetry Out Loud print or online anthology, which again can be found at www.poetryoutloud.org. And now, it's time for our first round of competition. In this round, before each of the 12 finalists presents their first recitation, we're going to hear a little about each of the finalists in their own words, so we can know a little more about them before we hear them recite this exciting first piece of poetry. So with that, we're going to hear a little bit more about, from Bergen Kloot-Pater of Petersburg High School.
Hello, my name is Bergen Kloot-Pater, and I will be representing Petersburg High School in my hometown, Petersburg, which is located on Mitkof Island in Southeast Alaska. This year, I will be graduating and attending classes at the University of Idaho in Moscow to study political science. The poems I chose in this year's competition are meant to reflect the reality of war and conflict, as well as illuminate the place people have in society. I participate in Poetry Out Loud this year because I have made strides to improve my public speaking and speech skills, which have resulted in my success in Poetry Out Loud. I've always been passionate about literature and the weight words carry if wielded correctly, which is precisely what inspires me about poetry reading and recitation. To anyone who might consider Poetry Out Loud at some point, I implore you to do so. It's a great experience and will benefit you in a literary sense as well as in your language skills.
Thank you, Bergen, for sharing a little bit about yourself with us. And now we will hear Bergen's first recitation.
We Lived Happily During the War by Ilya Kaminsky. And when they bombed other people's houses, we protested, but not enough. We opposed them, but not enough. I was in my bed. Around my bed, America was falling. Invisible house by invisible house by invisible house. I took a chair outside and watched the sun. In the 6th month of a disastrous rain. In the house of money, in the street of money, in the city of money, in the country of money. Our great country of money, we, forgive us, lived happily during the war.
Thank you, Bergen, for that first inspiring poetry recitation. Next, we'll learn a little about Brenna Keith of West Anchorage High School.
Hello, I'm Brenna Keith from West Anchorage High School. I'm a junior, and in the future I plan to attend an out-of-state college in Washington. The 3 poems I selected are very different and special in their own ways, and they all contrast stylistically. I've been in Poetry Out Loud since my freshman year, and I deeply enjoy the process, and I plan on doing it again next year. For me, poetry is like looking into an author's soul, and to understand their poetry is understanding their soul. Understanding a person is something that I value deeply, and Poetry Out Loud allows me to share that value with the world.
Thank you, Brenna. And now we'll hear Brenna's first poetry recitation.
The Coming Woman by Mary Weston Fordham. Just look, 'tis 6:15, love, and not even the fires are caught. Well, you know I must be at the office, but as usual, the breakfast'll be late. Now hurry and wake up the children and dress them as fast as you can. Poor dearies, I know they'll be tardy. Dear me, what a slow, pokey man. Have the tenderloin broiled nice and juicy. Have the toast browned and buttered all right. And be sure that you settle the coffee. Be sure that the silver is bright. When ready, just run up and call me. At 8 to the office I go, lest poverty grim should o'ertake us. 'Tis bread and butter, you know. The bottom from stocks may fall out. My bonds may get below par. Then surely I seldom could spare you a nickel to buy a cigar. All ready? Now, while I am eating, just bring up my wheel to the door. Then wash up the dishes and, mind now, have dinner promptly at 4. For tonight is our women's convention, and I am to speak first, you know. The men veto us in private, but in public they shout, "That's so." So bye-bye. In case of a rap, love, before opening the door, you must look. Oh, how could a civilized woman exist without a man cook?
Thank you for that recitation, Brenna. Next, we'll hear from and learn a little more about Brielle Lawrenson of Tenalian School in Port Allsworth.
Hi, my name is Brielle Lawrenson, and I'm from Port Allsworth, Alaska, and I will be representing Tenalian High School. I just really love the poems that I've selected, and I hope you enjoy them as much as I have. I just love poetry. I find it truly beautiful and memorizing, and it is truly a vessel for like feelings that you have that you want to express. If I have any words of wisdom, it would just be to choose a poem that truly like means something to you, that you relate to. It just makes the experience truly more exciting, and you should be doing something that you love.
Thank you, Brielle. And now we'll hear Brielle's first poetry recitation.
Hello, my name is Brielle Lawrenson, and I will be reciting A Thank You Note by Michael Ryan. My daughter made drawings with the pens you sent. Line drawings that suggest things they represent, different from any drawing that she at 10 had done. Closer to real art, implying what the mind fills in. For her mother she made a flower, fragile on its stem. For me, a lion calm, contained. but not a handsome one. He drew me a line once before on a Gadwall card and wrote, "I must be brave, even when it's hard." Such love is healing, as you know, my friend, especially when it comes unbidden from our children. Despite the flaws they see so vividly in us, who can love you as your child does? Your son, so ill, the brutal chemo, his looming loss, owning you now. Yet you would be this generous to think of my child. With the pens you sent, she's made, I hope, a healing instrument.
Thank you for that presentation, Brielle. Our fourth contestant is Caitlin Greenleaf of Whitestone Farms Training Center in Delta Junction, and we'll now learn a little bit more about her.
Hello, my name is Caitlin Greenleaf, and I'm from Whitestone High School. Personally, I love poetry because of the complicated feelings and experiences it describes simply through words. I love how poetry uses imagery to convey emotion, and overall, poetry is really just a beautiful and unique way of describing and really questioning life. To anybody who's looking into doing this poetry out loud, I would really recommend it. Not only is it fun, but it's taught me a lot of things about public speaking and poetry in general that I will carry into the rest of my life. Overall, I'm really happy to be able to be a part of this experience.
Thank you, Caitlin, and we'll now hear Caitlin's first piece of recitation.
Safe in Their Alabaster Chambers by Emily Dickinson. Safe in their alabaster chambers, untouched by morning and untouched by noon, sleep the meek members of the resurrection, rafter of satin and roof of stone. Grand go the years in the crescent above them. Worlds scoop their arcs, firmaments row, diadems drop, and dogs surrender, soundless as dots on a disk of snow.
Thank you, Caitlin. Our fifth contestant in the Alaska Poetry Out Loud statewide finals is Kalia Fielding of Skagway School, and we'll learn a little bit more now from Kalia.
Hi, my name is Kalia Fielding. I'm representing Skagway High School from Skagway, Alaska. Throughout my school experience, I've done a lot of public speaking. I am in DDF, Drama, Debate, and Forensics. I'm also in robotics and student council. In the future, I'm not really sure what I want to do. I've thought about a lot of things. Right now, I'm really interested in architecture, but I've developed public speaking skills throughout my high school lifetime, so I would like to use those in my future as well a lot. This year, when I was looking for poems, I really looked for ones that I thought made social commentary, so I went to the social commentary section of the Poetry Out Loud website, and I looked for ones that I thought represented ideas that either hit home for me or that I really connected with, or things that I felt strongly about. I participated in Poetry Out Loud this year. I just love Poetry Out Loud because I think that seeing other people's performances as well as being able to make my own performances really inspires me, and inspires me to write my own poetry, to look at more poetry, to read poetry, and it's an experience that I overall enjoy a lot. If I were to give someone advice for Poetry Out Loud, I'd just say pick a poem that you enjoy. I don't think that picking poems is about what you think you can do well. I don't think it's about what poem other people tell you to choose or what they say will make you win, but I think it's about choosing a poem that you really connect with, something that you really love or connect deeply with, and I think that's the whole point of Poetry Out Loud, and just seeing authors' experiences and connecting them with your own, as well as getting the chance to look through all this poetry and see other people's performances. So, fun. Bye.
Thank you, Kalia. And now we'll hear Kalia's first recitation.
This is Passive Voice by Laura Daw. I use a trick to teach students how to avoid passive voice. Circle the verbs. Imagine inserting "by zombies" after each one. Have your words been claimed by the flesh-hungry undead? If so, passive voice. I wonder if these sixth graders will recollect on summer vacation as they stretched their legs on the way home from Yellowstone or Yosemite, and the byway's historical marker beckons them to an Indian village where trouble was brewing, where after further hostilities the army was directed to enter, where the village was razed after the skirmish occurred, where most were women and children. Riveted bramble of passive verbs etched in wood, stripped hands breaking up from the dry ground to pinch the meat of their young red tongues. Thank you.
Thank you, Kalia, for your first recitation. And now, our sixth contestant, Claire Moreland of West Anchorage High School.
Hi, my name is Claire Moreland and I'm from West High School. I've lived in Alaska my whole life, grew up in Eagle River, and I'm really excited to be doing Poetry Out Loud this year. I've always been interested in poetry, but over the pandemic I started reading the poems of Emily Dickinson and Sylvia Plath and just really got invested, and so I'm super excited to be competing this year.
Thank you, and now we will hear Claire's first recitation.
Time does not bring relief, you all have lied, by Edna St. Vincent Millay. Time does not bring relief. You all have lied. Who told me time would ease me of my pain? I miss him in the weeping of the rain. I want him in the shrinking of the tide. The old snows melt from every mountainside, and last year's leaves are smoke in every lane. But last year's bitter loving must remain heaped on my heart, and my old thoughts abide. There are 100 places where I fear to go, so with his memory they brim. And entering with relief some quiet place where never fell his foot or shone his face, I say, there is no memory of him here. And so stand stricken, so remembering him.
Thank you, Claire, for your first recitation. Our seventh finalist is Imani Zeddy of Chugiak High School.
Hi, my name is Imani Zeddy, and I attend Chugiak High School, and I live in Eagle River, Alaska. I picked Since There Is No Escape by Sarah Teasdale, The World Is Too Much With Us by William Wordsworth, and Once the World Was Perfect by Joy Harjo. I felt that they were so much easier to connect to than any other poem, and I could relate to them on an emotional level. My teacher convinced me to this year with part of our exam, and I continued to go to regionals and now state because I enjoyed it so much more than I thought I would. It's relatable, not all poems, but there are poems that you can just connect to, and they can fit almost any timeline. They're endless and just so relatable. Do poetry out loud. You won't regret it.
Thank you, Imani, and now we'll hear her first recitation.
Since There Is No Escape by Sarah Teasdale. Since there is no escape, since at the end my body will be utterly destroyed. This hand I love as I have loved a friend. This body I tended, wept with, and enjoyed. Since there is no escape, even for me, who love life with a love too sharp to bear. The scent of orchards in the rain, the sea, and hours alone too still and sure for prayer. Since darkness waits for me, then all the more. Let me go down as waves sweep to the shore in pride, and let me sing with my last breath. In these few hours of light, I lift my head. Life is my lover. I shall leave the dead, if there is any way to baffle death.
Thank you, Imani. Our next contestant, and from whom we'll hear in a moment to learn a little bit about her, is Madeline Bremer of North Pole High School.
Hi, my name is Malin Bremer, coming to you from the small community of North Pole. I'm very excited to compete in Alaska's Poetry Out Loud. And I'm from North Pole High School. I know, name is the same as the city, but a reason why I chose these poems to compete with is because I felt a certain connection with them as I read through them, performed them in front of my school, and did a little bit more research to get a third poem for this competition. And I hope others do while I am performing it, or as the judges read it, or as people just look them up, because Poetry Out Loud is a great foundation and I'm really proud of them. Reason why I got into Poetry Out Loud is because I had the opportunity to do this in freshman year, and I regrettably did not participate because I thought I was too busy to do so. I kind of was, but it was no excuse. My teacher, Miss Alexander, actually pushed me to compete because she really liked my graded performance for school back in freshman year. So I tried to do it sophomore year, didn't happen, but this year, I'm ready to do it. So after winning districts, I'm very excited to compete, and I hope everyone else is having as great a time as I am.
Thank you, Madeleine. And now we'll hear Madeleine's first recitation.
The Calm by Sean O'Brien. At the mouth of the river, moon, stars, an arctic calm, the twin lights at the end of the piers, revolving with a smoothness we expect of supernatural machinery. Seen from down here on the beach, the harbored ocean slowly tilts like a mirror discreetly manhandled by night from the giant room it was supposed to occupy forever. The mind says now, but the stars on their jelly gimbals roll and fade, a tide of constellations breaking nowhere every night about this time. Strike up the band. In the tumble-down bar, the singer has fallen from stardom and grace. Though her interests nowadays are wholly secular, she can still refer back to the angels. And knowing that song, we share a moment with the saved before we leave to make the crossing. No captain, no ferry, but cross we shall. Believe you, me.
Thank you, Madeleine. Our next finalist, from whom we'll hear a little bit about herself, is Mariah McGuire of Homer High School.
Hello, I'm Mariah McGuire, representing Homer High School of the Kenya Peninsula. As I'm a senior in high school, my plan afterwards is aiming for universities in South Korea for something in fine arts, language, or social and culture studies. I chose First Love because it reminded me of my partner, Luna Moth because the imagery and rhythm were lovely, and Poor Angels because it spoke to mental challenges I go through. So I could make all three of them quite personal. I participated so heavily this year because I realized I enjoy poetry since I can deliver both thoughts and emotions that I don't otherwise allow myself to show on a daily basis. My advice for students considering poetry out loud is to find poems that are personal to you or that you like the pattern of speaking with. I've found it makes the recitations not only higher quality, but more enjoyable too. Keep looking for the poems that allow you to do that.
Thank you, Mariah. And now we'll hear Mariah's first piece.
First Love by John Clare. I ne'er was struck before that hour with love so sudden and so sweet. Her face, it bloomed like a sweet flower and stole my heart away complete. My face turned pale, as deadly pale, my legs refused to walk away, and when she looked, What could I ail? My life and all seemed turned to clay. And then my blood rushed to my face and took my eyesight quite away. The trees and bushes round the place seemed midnight at noonday. I could not see a single thing. Words from my eyes did start. They spoke as chords do from the string, and blood burned round my heart. Are flowers the winter's choice? Is love's bed always snow? She seemed to hear my silent voice, not love's appeals to know. I never saw so sweet a face as that I stood before. My heart has left its dwelling place and can return no more.
Thank you very much, Mariah, for that recitation. Our next contestant is Naomi Tidwell of Ben Eielson Junior Senior School at Eielson Air Force Base. And we'll hear a little bit from her
Hi,
next.
my name is Naomi Tidwell, and I'm representing Ben Eielson High School. I'm from Salta, Alaska. I'm a senior this year, and I plan to attend BYU, Idaho in the fall and major in psychology. One of the poems I really liked that I learned this year was About Standing in Kinship by Kimberly Blazer. I really enjoy this poem because it talks about the strength and unity that we have in our communities and how when we lean on each other for strength, we're able to get through hard things. And I've been able to experience that in my own community. I participated in Poetry Out Loud my sophomore year, and I really loved the experience. And so I decided to do it again this year. Poetry has always been really important to me as a form of self-expression and as a coping mechanism at times. It's been really neat to read and learn the works of others and be able to bring them to life through recitation. For anyone who is thinking about participating in Poetry Out Loud, I would really recommend it. It's a really cool opportunity that I don't think you get all the time, so I think it's really fun.
Thank you, Naomi. And here is Naomi's first recitation.
History Lesson by Natasha Treadway. I am 4 in this photograph, standing on a wide strip of Mississippi beach, my hands on the flowered hips of a bright bikini. My toes dig in, curl around wet sand. The sun cuts the rippling gulf in flashes with each tidal rush. Minnows dart at my feet, glinting like switchblades. I am alone, except for my grandmother, other side of the camera, telling me how to pose. It is 1970, 2 years after they opened the rest of this beach to us. 40 years since the photograph where she stood, on a narrow plot of sand marked colored, smiling, her hands on the flowered hips of a cotton meal sack dress.
Thank you, Naomi. Our next contestant in the Alaska Poetry Out Loud statewide finals for 2022 is Nikolai Chavez of Whitestone Farms Training Center in Delta Junction.
Hi, my name is Nikolai Chavez and I go to Whitestone High School. I think the thing that inspires me most about poetry is that it is a really good way to connect with people through an experience, because it's a lot of words describing a very specific set of emotions. And I really chose the 3 poems that I'm doing because they are either themes that I really enjoy or they're emotions that I'm familiar with. I think what I would say to anyone who's looking into doing Poetry Out Loud is it's really fun, but it's a lot of work, so be warned.
Thank you, Nikolai. And here is Nikolai's first recitation.
Spanglish by Tato Leviera. Pues estoy creando Spanglish, bicultural systems. Scientific lexicographical intertextual integrations. 2 expressions, existentially wired. 2 dominant languages, continentally abrazándose en coloquial combate. En las aceras del soil, Imperio Spanglish emerges. Control pandiaje sobre territorio bilingual, las novelas mexicanas mixing with radio rock and roll. Condimented cocina lore, immigrant, migrant, nasal mispronouncements. Barajachismeteo Social Club, hip-hop, prieto street salsa, corner, soul, and mixturandos, Spanish pop farandula. Standard English classroom with computer technicalities. Spanglish is literally perfect. Spanglish is ethnically snobbish. Spanglish is cara holy inteligencia. Which US slang do you speak?
Thank you, Nikolai. And the 12th of our finalists in this first round of Poetry Out Loud is Rayanna Proch from the Upstream Learning Center in the Copper River School District, and we'll hear a little bit about her.
Hi, my name is Rayanna Proch, and I'm in 9th grade. My sisters and I do homeschool through the Upstream Learning Program. My 3 poems that I chose for this year are Piano by D.H. Lawrence, Battle Hymn of the Republic by Julia Ward Howe, and In Flanders Fields by John McCrae. I chose In Flanders Fields and Battle Hymn of the Republic because of its patriotism during wartime. I also chose Battle Hymn of the Republic because of its Christianity and it's based on the Bible. I chose piano because it helps communicate what I feel about the piano. I enjoy piano, music, art, crafts, and sewing. I hope to add poetry to one of these.
Thank you, Rayanna. And this is Rayanna's first recitation.
In Flanders Fields by John McCrae. In Flanders Fields, the poppies blow between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky, the larks, still bravely singing, fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead. 6 days ago, we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders Fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe, to you. From failing hands we throw the torch, be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies blow in Flanders Fields.
Thank you, Rayanna. And just like that, we have gone through round 1 of our Alaska State Poetry Out Loud finals. Thank you all for those beautiful selections and the incredibly strong presentations of each of them. So now we're going to move right on into round 2 of our competition and hear those recitations from each of our 12 finalists. During this round, all of the poetry selections were scored after the recitations were done by the students, but there are a few poems we're not going to broadcast, 3 specifically, because we don't have the intellectual property broadcast rights for those. When I announce the selection of those poems, I encourage you to go to poetryoutloud.org and you can look at the text of them if you would like. During round 2, we're also going to hear from some of our Poetry Out Loud judging panel about their experiences with the Poetry Out Loud process, what they learned from being judges, what they learned from these fine young Alaskan students, and what they thought and how it touched them. So again, if I read a student's name but there is not a recitation, please look that poem title up at poetryoutloud.org. But with no further ado, please welcome back Bergen Kloot-Painter of Petersburg High School.
The Charge of the Light Brigade by Alfred Lord Tennyson. Half a league, half a league, half a league onward, all of the valley of death rode the 600. Forward the Light Brigade, charge for the guns, he said. Into the valley of death rode the 600. Forward the Light Brigade. Was there a man dismayed? Not though the soldier knew someone had blundered. Theirs not to make reply, theirs not to reason why, theirs but to do and die. Into the valley of death rode the 600. Cannon to right of them, cannon to left of them, cannon in front of them, volleyed and thundered, stormed at with shot and shell. Boldly they rode and well, into the jaws of death, into the mouth of hell, rode the 600. Flashed all their sabers bare, flashed as they turned in air, sabering the gunners there, charging an army while all the world wondered. Plunged in the battery smoke, right through the line they broke. Cossack and Russian reeled from the saber stroke, shattered and sundered. Then they rode back, but not the 600. Cannon to right of them, cannon to left of them, cannon behind them, volleyed and thundered, stormed at with shot and shell, while horse and hero fell. They that had fought so well came through the jaws of death, back from the mouth of hell. All that was left of them, left of 600. When can their glory fade? Oh, the wild charge they made. All the world wondered. Honor the charge they made. Honor the Light Brigade. Noble 600.
Thank you very much, Bergen Kloot-Painter of Petersburg High School. Now, for her second recitation, let's welcome back Brenna Keith of West Anchorage High School.
Propositions by Stephen Dunn. Anyone who begins a sentence with, "in all honesty," is about to tell a lie. Anyone who says, "this is how I feel," had better love form more than disclosure. Same for anyone who thinks he thinks well because he had a thought. If you say, "you're ugly," to an ugly person, no credit for honesty, which must always be a discovery, an act that qualifies as an achievement. If you persist, you're just a cruel bastard, a pig without a mirror, somebody who hasn't examined himself enough. A hesitation hints at an attempt to be honest, suggests a difficulty is present. A good sentence needs a clause or two, interruptions set off by commas, evidence of a slowing down, a rethinking. Before I asked my wife to marry me, I told her I'd never be fully honest. No one, she said, had ever said that to her. I was trying to be radically honest, I said, but in fact had another motive. A claim without a but in it is, at best, only half true. In all honesty, I was asking in advance to be forgiven.
Thank you, Brenna Keith of West Anchorage High School. And now we'll hear some comments from one of our Poetry Out Loud judges, Vivian Meldy of Anchorage.
Well, I'm real excited to be a part of Poetry Out Loud for 2022. And it brings me back to the years in grammar school where we had to learn poems. And, I am very enthused at the selections and the diversity of the poems that were chosen. The maturity of the delivery was very impressive for me. And I believe that, there was an underlying current of what's happening in our world today that these students are very much aware of. And I think through the art of poetry, it's speaking to our hearts. So I'm real excited about this year's group of Poetry Out Loud. Thank you.
Thank you, Vivian, and thanks for all that you've done over the course of your time in Alaska to help make us a more artistically enriched place, including serving as a judge for Poetry Out Loud this year. Now let's hear again and welcome back Brielle Lawrenson of Tenalian School in Port Alsworth.
My name is Brielle Lawrenson, and I will be reciting Discrimination by Kenneth Rexroth. I don't mind the human race. I've gotten pretty used to them in these last 25 years. I don't mind if they sit next to me in streetcars or in the same restaurants, if it's not at the same table. However, I don't approve of a woman I respect dancing with one of them. I've tried asking them to my home without success. I shouldn't care to see my own sister marry one. Even if she loved him, think of the children. Their art is interesting, but certainly barbarous. I'm sure if given the chance, they'd all kill us in our beds. And you must admit, they smell.
Thank you, Brielle Lawrenson of the Tenalian School in Port Alsworth. Our next contestant here in round 2 of Poetry Out Loud Finals is Caitlin Greenleaf of the Whitestone Farms Training Center in Delta Junction.
Emily Dickinson at the Poetry Slam by Dan Vera. I will tell you why she rarely ventured from her house. It happened like this. One day she took the train to Boston, made her way to the darkened room, put her name down in cursive script, and waited her turn. When they read her name aloud, she made her way to the stage, straightened the papers in her hands, pages and envelopes, backs of grocery bills. She closed her eyes for a minute, took a breath, and began. From her mouth, perfect words exploded, intact formulas of light and darkness. She dared to rhyme with words like cochineal and describe the skies like diadem. Obscurely worded incantations filled the room with an alchemy that made the very molecules quake. The solitary words she handled in her upstairs room with keen precision came rumbling out to make the electric lights flicker. 40 members of the audience were treated for hypertension. 20-year-old dark-haired beauties found their heads had turned to Moses white. Her second poem erased the memory of every cell phone in the nightclub, and by the 4th line of the 6th verse, the grandmother in the upstairs apartment had been cured of her rheumatism. The papers reported the power outages, the area hospitals taxed their emergency generators, and sirens were heard to wail through the night. Quietly, she made her way to the exit, walked to the terminal, and rode back to Amherst. She never left the room again and never read such syllables aloud.
Thank you for that second recitation to Caitlin Greenleaf of the Whitestone Farms Training Center in Delta Junction. And now we'll hear from another one of our judges this year, Ingvild Vatngutu.
This is my first time working with the Poetry Out Loud crowd, and I was really, really happy to be asked. I actually had as my New Year's resolution for this year to bring back more poetry in my life, specifically to start the day with a poem. And so I just felt, yep, this is the same. Good universe giving me another pat on the back, saying that you can listen for a whole day to beautiful poetry recited by amazing people. So thank you. I think that, well, I'll speak for myself. I think that we were all, no, I won't speak for myself. I'll speak for everyone. I think we were all taken aback by the humanity and the maturity of the participants here. And the choices of the poems are really timely and eerily so. I think that this time that we're in is asking for us all to take art very seriously as what it can do in our lives. So I think that that's something that's very clear that everybody here is feeling. And so for that, I just want to thank everybody for sharing their hearts and their souls and their humanity with us today. Thank you.
And thank you, Ingvild, for serving as a judge for Poetry Out Loud this year, and also for all the many wonderful things you've done to promote wonderful artistic and cultural opportunities for Alaskans. It's very much appreciated. Our next finalist here in round 2 is Kalia Fielding of Skagway School. And as I mentioned a little while ago, we unfortunately do not have the broadcast rights for this piece, but she did recite "We Are Not Responsible" by Harriet Mullen. And if you want to go to poetryoutloud.org and look that up, you can see the written version of that and just imagine what it sounded like when Kalia recited it. With that, we'll move on to our 6th contestant here in round 2, Claire Moreland of West Anchorage High School.
Dirge Without Music by Edna St. Vincent Millay. I am not resigned to the shutting away of loving hearts in the hard ground. So it is, and so it will be, for so it has been, time out of mind. Into the darkness they go, the wise and the lovely. Crowned with lilies and with laurel they go. But I am not resigned. Lovers and thinkers, into the earth with you. Be one with the dull, the indiscriminate dust. fragment of what you felt, of what you knew. A formula, a phrase remains, but the best is lost. The answers quick and keen, the honest look, the laughter, the love, they're gone. They're gone to feed the roses. Elegant and curled is the blossom, fragrant is the blossom. I know, but I do not approve. More precious was the light in your eyes than all the roses in the world. Down, down, down into the darkness of the grave. Gently they go. The beautiful, the tender, the kind. Quietly they go. The intelligent, the witty, the brave. I know, but I do not approve, and I am not resigned.
Thank you to Claire Moreland of West Anchorage High School for that recitation. The next candidate or contestant is Imani Zeddy of Chugiak High School. And once again, unfortunately, we do not have the broadcast rights for this poem. She recited Once the World Was Perfect by Joey Harjo, who is, by the way, our National Poet Laureate. So thank you to Imani Zeddy for reciting that piece. And of course, it was scored by the judges, and that score was incorporated into the final totals that are going to lead to the selection of tonight's winner and runner-up. Our eighth contestant here in round two is Madeleine Bremer of North Pole High School.
Sonnet 15, When I Consider Everything That Grows, by William Shakespeare. When I consider everything that grows, holds imperfection but a little moment, that this huge stage presenteth naught but shows, whereon the stars in secret influence comment. When I perceive that men as plants increase, cheered and checked even by the selfsame sky, vaunt in their youthful sap, at height decrease, and wear their brave state out of memory. Then the conceit of this inconstant stay sets you, most rich in youth, before my sight. Where wasteful time debateth with decay, to change your day of youth to sully night. And all in war with time, for love of you, as he takes from you, I engraft you new. Thank you.
Thank you, Madeleine Bremer of North Pole High School, for sharing that piece of Shakespeare with us. We're now going to hear from another of our judges, Heather Lendy.
I too I'm really grateful to be here today. And as a writer, I think especially to hear students interpreting, internalizing, feeling words and poems that have been written in some cases hundreds of years ago, in some cases more recently. That's really heartening for people like me who write, to know that it matters and it connects with people. I think the thing most overwhelmingly today that I'm feeling listening to the students share their poems is how courageous you all are, just to put your heart out on the table and recite a poem with all of your body and spirit for us all to hear is really something that I want to applaud. And I want to thank you for, as it's been said earlier, reminding us about our shared humanity and the things that matter. That's the thing.
Thank you very much to Heather Lendy for being one of our judges this year. Heather is also the state Writer Laureate, and we'll hear a little more from her later about her important work in that capacity for Alaskans. Our next finalist here in round 2 is Mariah McGuire of Homer High School.
Luna Moss by Carl Phillips. No eye that sees could fail to remark you. Like any leaf the rain leaves fixed to and flat against the barn's gray shingle. But what leaf this time of year is so pale? The pale of leaves when they've lost just enough green to become the green that means loss, and more loss approaching. Give up the flesh enough times and whatever is lost gets forgotten. That was the thought that I woke to, those words in my head. I rose, I did not dress, I left no particular body sleeping, and stepping into the hour, I saw you. Strange sign, at once transparent and impossible to entirely see through, and how still. The still of being unmoved, and then the still of no longer being able to be moved. If I think of a heart, his, as I've found it, if I think of, increasingly, my own, if I look at you now, as from above, and see the diva when she is caught in mid-triumph, arms half raised, the body of his set at last free of the green sheath that has, how many nights, held her, it is not without remembering another I once saw, like you. Except that something, a bird, some wild and necessary hunger had gotten to it, and like the diva, but now broken, splayed, and torn. The green torn piecemeal from her, I remember the hands and how small they seemed, bringing the small, ripped thing to me.
Thank you to Mariah McGuire of Homer High School for that recitation. The next contestant tonight is Naomi Tidwell of Ben Eielson Junior Senior High School at Eielson Air Force Base. And unfortunately, we do not have the broadcast rights to I Felt a Funeral in My Brain 340 by Emily Dickinson. So rest assured that Naomi did recite this and it was scored, and those scores were incorporated into the scores that are going to generate our round 3 final finalists in a little while here during this evening's broadcast. With that, we'll hear from one more of our judges, Leslie Ishii from here in Juneau.
Hello to our esteemed poets of Poetry Out Loud. I'm Leslie Ishii. I go by she, her pronouns. And I am tuning in from the unceded territories of the Occoquan peoples here on Tlingit Ani, also known as Juneau, Douglas, Alaska. And it is my great honor and pleasure to congratulate you. I come to this work as a theater practitioner where we honor the word, the scripts, all the chosen language by writers, by playwrights. And I am so grateful that I had the opportunity to hear each of you recite your poems that you have chosen. And wow, the courageous choices you made, not only of the poems, but of your interpretations. Thank you for that. I'm very moved by that. And I'm also moved that because you gave me hope for our future, your humanity that came through. And I don't take lightly that language brings forth and informs our actions in how we move through the world. And I am so heartened by what you shared. I feel we have a great, great future ahead because of how you're interpreting the words of these poets. So again, thank you so much. I hope you continue to work with this level of discipline, with this exploration of language, again, because you give me great hope for our collective humanity, and you've led with such courage and love. My gratitude, my deepest Japanese bow to you. Thank you.
And thank you, Leslie Ishii, for being one of our panelists for the statewide finals and for all the other great work you do for the arts here in Alaska. Our 11th contestant here in round 2 for the Poetry Out Loud statewide finals is Nicolai Chavez of Whitestone Farms Training Center in Delta Junction.
The Arrow in the Song by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. I shot an arrow into the air. It fell to earth, I knew not where. For so swiftly it flew, the sight could not follow it in its flight. I breathed a song into the air. It fell to earth, I knew not where. For who has sight so keen and strong that it can follow the flight of song? Long, long afterward, in an oak, I found the arrow, still unbroke, and the song, from beginning to end, I found again in the heart of a friend.
Thank you, Nicolai Chavez of the Whitestone Farms Training Center in Delta Junction. And the 12th and final contestant here in round 2 of the statewide Poetry Out Loud finals is Rihanna Proch of the Upstream Learning Program in the Copper River School District.
Battle Hymn of the Republic by Julia Ward Howe. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is trampling out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. He hath loosed the fateful lightning of his terrible, swift sword. His truth is marching on. I have seen him in the watchfires of 100 circling camps. They have built him an altar in the evening dews and damps. I have read his wretched sentence in the dim and flaring lamps. His day is marching on. I have read a fiery gospel written in burnished rows of steel. As you deal with my contenders, so with ye my grace shall deal. Let the hero, born of women, crush the serpent with his heel, since God is marching on. He has sounded forth a trumpet that shall never call retreat. He is sifting out the hearts of men before his judgment seat. Oh, be swift, my soul, to answer him. Be jubilant, my feet. Our God is marching on. In the beauty of the lilies, Christ was born across the sea, with a glory in his bosom that transfigures you and me. As he died to make men holy, let us die to make men free, while God is marching on.
Thank you, Rihanna Proch of the Upstream Learning Program in the Copper River School District. And that is the end of the first 2 rounds of our final competition this evening. And so I want to once again thank the statewide judging panelists, but there are many, many others who joined them and the students in putting a great deal of work into this program, without which it would simply not be possible. There are the regional competitions that we mentioned earlier, and there were panelists who spent a lot of time adjudicating the video recitations submitted from students across the state. And all of their work was done remotely via distance. So I want to thank Annie Wenstrup of Fairbanks, Jared Griffin of Kodiak, Mahogany Magnetic, Jen Stever Ruckel, and Kristen Ritter of Anchorage, Jenny Nyman of Soldotna, Mickey Kenny from here in Juneau, and Jennifer Norton in Homer. It's a lot of work judging these students, and it's a lot more work in some ways to have to do it virtually. So we're really grateful to the work that those panelists put in, which fed into the overall process that yielded the fine performances that you're watching tonight. We also had state poetry coaches, Poetry Out Loud coaches, who worked with the statewide finalists to prepare for the state competition this evening. And this was also done via distance. So Dita Sharpley, Donnie Gott, DJ Durego, Frank Delaney, and Flordelino Lagodito, all of Juneau, worked remotely to help coach the students and help them improve their skills, which were already considerable, even more so you can see such fine work that they're sharing with us all across Alaska and beyond tonight. There are Poetry Out Loud liaisons in the schools that participate, especially those in the state finals. And those liaisons worked with the students to prepare for classroom, school, regional, and this statewide Poetry Out Loud competition. And they coordinated with the Alaska State Poetry Out Loud Committee. So those liaisons include Tim Shumway from Petersburg High School, John Rulin, David Vano, and Rachel Kitto from West Anchorage High School, Nicole Metzger of Tenalian School in Port Alsworth, Lynn Chavez of Whitestone Farms Training Center in Delta Junction, Kent Fielding from Skagway School, Mary Richards at Chugiak High School, Elizabeth Alexander of North Pole High School, Suzanne Bishop at Homer High School, Mariko Kennekin of Ben Eielson Junior Senior High School at Eielson Air Force Base, and Mark Proch of the Upstream Learning Program in the Copper River School District. The Alaska State Council on the Arts and the Poetry Out Loud Committee also want to thank the Alaska State Libraries, Archives, and Museums Division of the State Department of Education and Early Development, and the staff of the Andrew P. Kashaveroff building right next door here to KTOO in downtown Juneau, because they hosted the adjudication panel. And so all the names I've just mentioned are people and groups who have come together to support all these fine young Alaskans through Poetry Out Loud. So the process, just to go back to that, the state panelists met just prior to this competition that you're watching tonight to adjudicate the poetry recitations from the state finalists. And based on the scores from those first 2 rounds, which we just saw, a group of third round finalists were identified. Final finalists, I guess, if you will. So soon we're going to hear from the third round finalists whose recitations were scored by the judging panel. But then, because so much hard work has gone into preparation by these young Alaskans, we'll also hear from the other 6 young Alaskans who prepared a third poetry recitation for this third part of the competition. There can't be enough poetry in the world, and so it really is a wonderful outcome, and we recognize and are so grateful for all the hard work of all the students who participated in Poetry Out Loud this year, and indeed every year that this program has taken place. And I'll just say as an aside, I've had the great privilege of welcoming these students to the capital city up through 2020 when the pandemic hit us. And for most of those years, I've been able to take the students and their chaperones from the steps of the Alaska State Capitol over to the governor's house and to give them a tour of the residence of Alaska's chief executive. And I very much hope next year I get to do it again. So if you don't win this year and you're still eligible to participate, I hope to see you and your mom or your dad or whoever your chaperone is, and we can go up to the governor's house, because they also give out cookies at the end of the tour. So it's always a good time. So before we get to the third and final round of recitations, I'm very proud and pleased to introduce the Alaska State Writer Laureate for 2021 to 2023. It has been our tradition to hear from an Alaskan literary artist during this competition. And the State Writer Laureate program is a cooperative endeavor between the Alaska State Council on the Arts and our colleagues and friends at the Alaska Humanities Forum, which is Alaska's state humanities agency. And Heather Lendy, as I mentioned earlier, is our current state writer, and she's a very fine writer from Haines, Alaska, and obviously does a lot of good work, including serving as a panelist for this competition. So with no further ado, please let's listen and learn from Alaska State writer Heather Lendy.
It's really an honor to be here on behalf of all Alaska writers and especially the poets. And I really wanted to thank the teachers and the parents and the friends who've been listening to these students as they go about their lives and spout poetry out into the world. I also wanted to note that the tone of the poems that have been chosen that we've heard so far and we're going to keep hearing reminds me of Joy Harjo saying that it's impossible to make it through tragedy without poetry. And I think we have to acknowledge as well that we're in the middle of a very frightening time right now, and there's a war happening in the Ukraine. And I turned to poems at this time, and I wanted to share with you one from a Ukrainian poet, translator, and journalist, Iakiva. And when it came my turn to be killed, everyone started to speak Lithuanian. Everyone started to call me Yanukas, summoned me hither in their native land. My God, I said, I'm not Lithuanian. My God, I told them, I said it in Yiddish. My God, I told them, I said it in Russian. My God, I sent to them in Ukrainian. There, where the Kalmius flows into the Neman, a child is crying in a church. A child is crying in a church. And this group of students and all of us, I think, the last couple years, it's felt like in some ways we've been children crying in a church or in a basement, the pandemic, infuriating politics, prejudice, injustice, pocketbook woes, and now Putin attacking it. It's too much. And I think in some ways it's very much reflected in the poems that these students have chosen But remember, I wrote a book called Find the Good. And there's a lot of good tonight in the poetry that these students are reading. As you know, Mr. Rogers said, I'm dating myself. I know I'm a grandmother, but look to the helpers. And as Joy Harjo said, poems are the way that we explain tragedy. They're also the way we celebrate joys. And right now, there's many women in Ukrainian churches, and they're making pierogies, and they're singing old folk songs, melodies that are poems. And, St. John said, we can't live by bread alone. We need words. And today, you kids are giving us words, really important words. Mary Oliver said that poems are fires for the cold, ropes let down to the lost, something as necessary as bread in the pockets of the hungry. So thank you. Thank you for choosing a Ukrainian-born poet, Eli Kaminsky, Edna St. Vincent Millay, Emily Dickinson, Joy Harjo. Thanks for letting their wisdom comfort and inspire us, and the music of their words move us. We're in this world together, and it shows. I wanted to also congratulate you on learning these poems. This is a competition, and competitions are kind of weird, especially in the arts. And I don't like being too judgy, and I don't think any of us did today. But really, you're all winners. You are the people who, when you sit at the dinner table at a birthday party or at a wedding, you make the toast, or at a funeral, you say some comforting words, you're going to have a verse right at the tip of your tongue. You're going to be able to be the one in the room that recites a poem. It's something that you're going to have for your whole life, and you're really lucky to have that. And I so admire people that can do that, and now I admire all of you. And I want to thank you for that. And I think before I close, I want to read you one more poem by Christy Nami Erickson from here in Juneau, because it speaks to who we are as Alaskans. And I think that's important now, too. We're in this together. Joy Harjo's ladder, going up to the light together. The rope, we're catching it. The poems that you're sharing with us bring us here together. You competitors are all in it together. Many of you have memorized the same poems over the course of this competition. And the poem is called Alaskans. We are fish people, wood people, the people's people. We are speak up, speak over the river people, steady ship, meandering beach, mountain peak people. We have to see it for ourselves kind of people. We are fixer-upper, do it or it doesn't get done people. We sing at church, we kiss our wives, we carve with our door open, we wear suits, we wear boots. We are spring clean Saturday people. We are strange, but we are no strangers. Happy Nalukataq, bingo, amen. We share our wins, we celebrate. Tree shakers, promise makers, we are believers. At any moment, we are the grandparents and grandchildren of greatness, genius, and luck, noble and gathered, wild miracles. We are wayfinding people. Trace the edge of your mother, and it will lead you to a coast. Who could truly tell where you or I begin, or where any of our legends end? Here, north is not a direction, it's a bond. We turn towards each other. May that be true. And thank you, or as we say here in Tlingit Ani, Gunashish.
And Gunalchish to you, Heather Lendy, Alaska's state writer. To learn more about the State Writer Program, you can go to akhf.org/state_writer_laureate. And Heather, you really are doing a great job, and we're so grateful to have you in that position. And I can't believe you're halfway through your 3-year term. Keep up the good work, and I really hope I get to see you sometime soon. That does bring us to round 3. And I'm going to announce in a moment the 6 of these 12 fine young Alaskans who are advancing to this final round in this competition. After the first 2 rounds, based upon the cumulative scores of the judging panel, these 6 participants were selected. And when I read their names out, that's the order in which they'll be presenting their third recitation. And that's really the only reason they are in that order. And so we brought them on screen, and I'm the only one here in the studio, so I can't do a drum roll. So imagine a drum roll in your minds, or jazz hands. How about some jazz hands in lieu of a drum roll? Very good. And so the third round finalists for the Alaska Poetry Out Loud 2022 competition are Brielle Lorenzen, Kalia Fielding, Claire Moreland, Imani Zeddy, Madeleine Bremer, and Nikolai Chavez. So congratulations to the 6 of you for advancing to this round, but congratulations to the other 6 of you for coming this far. And all 24 of those recitations we just heard in the first 2 rounds were inspiring and really uplifting. So I want to thank you for your wonderful work thus far, but we still have more to do. So having broken over to the live viewing party, we are going to start again. And let's please welcome back for round 3, Brielle Lorenzen of Tenalian School in Port Ellsworth.
My name is Brielle Lorenzen, and I will be reciting Mesopotamia by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Half of my life is gone, and I have let the years slip from me, and have not fulfilled the aspiration of my youth. To build some tower song with lofty parapet, not indolence, nor pleasure, nor the fret of restless passions that would not be stilled, but sorrow and a care that almost killed kept me from what I may accomplish yet. Though halfway up the hill I see the past lying beneath me with its sounds and sights. A city in the twilight, dim and vast, with smoking roofs, soft bells, and gleaming lights. And here above me, on the autumnal blast, the cataract of death, far thundering from the heights.
Thank you, Brielle Lorenzen of the Tenalian School in Port Ellsworth. Next, of our 6 third round finalists for Poetry Out Loud State Finals 2022, let's welcome back Kalia Fielding from the Skagway School.
This is Silence by Thomas Hood. There is a silence where hath been no sound. There is a silence where no sound may be. In the cold grave, under the deep, deep sea, or in the wide desert where no life is found, which hath been mute and still must sleep profound. No voice is hushed, no life treads silently, but clouds and cloudy shadows wander free, that never spoke, over the idle ground. But in green ruins, in the desolate walls of antique places where man hath been, though the dun fox and wild hyena calls, and owls that flit continually between, shriek to the echo, and the low winds moan. There, the true silence is, self-conscious and alone. Thank you.
Thank you, Kalia Fielding from the Skagway School. Third in our third round group of finalists is Claire Moreland of West Anchorage High School.
No Coward Soul is Mine by Emily Bronte. No coward soul is mine, no trembler in the world's storm-troubled sphere. I see heaven's glory shine, and faith shines equal, arming me from fear. O God within my breast, almighty ever-present deity, life that in me hast rest, as I, undying life, have power in thee. Vain are the 1,000 creeds that move men's hearts, unutterably vain, worthless as withered weeds, or idless froth amid the boundless main. To waken doubt in one, holding so fast to thy infinity, so surely anchored on the steadfast rock of immortality. With wide embracing love, thy spirit animates eternal years, pervades and broods above, changes, sustains, dissolves, creates, and rears. Though earth and moon were gone, and suns and universes ceased to be, and thou wert left alone, every existence would exist in thee. There is not room for death, nor atom that his might could render void, for thou art being and breath, and what thou art may never be destroyed.
Thank you to Claire Moreland of West Anchorage High School. Next up, fourth of our 6 third-round finalists is Imani Zeddy of Chugiak High School.
The World is Too Much with Us by William Wordsworth. The world is too much with us. Late and soon, getting and spending, we lay waste our powers. Little we see in nature that is ours. We have given our hearts away, a sordid boon. The sea that bears her bosom to the moon, the wind that will be howling at all hours and are upgathered now like sleeping flowers. For this, for everything, we are out of tune. It moves us not. Great God, I'd rather be a pagan suckled in a creed outworn, so might I, standing on this pleasant lea, have glimpses that would make me less forlorn. Have sight of Proteus rising from the sea, or hear old Triton blow his wreathed horn.
Thank you, Imani Zeddy of Chugiak High School. Next, the 5th of our 6 third-round finalists for the statewide Poetry Out Loud competition is Madeleine Bremer of North Pole High School.
Stomp by Nikki Grimes. I come home, feet about to bleed from angry stomping.
Boy,
Says Mom.
quit making all that racket.
But what does she expect when day after day haters sling words at me like jagged stones designed to split my skin? I retreat to my room, collapse on the bed, count 1, 2, 3. When I get to 10, I snatch up journal and pen, flip to a clean page, and unload my hurt, my rage! Till I can breathe. Again. Letter by letter, I rediscover my power to decide which words matter, which words don't, and whose. Calm now. I remember. I get to choose.
Thank you, Madeleine Bremer of North Pole High School. And the 6th third-round finalist with the 2022 Alaska Poetry Out Loud competition is once again Nicolai Chavez of Whitestone Farms Training Center in Delta Junction.
Mi Casa by Luis Daniel Salgado. When I was a boy, I was either a child eating bugs or a child being eaten by bugs. But now that I am older, am I a man who devours the world, or am I a man being devoured by the world? Someone once told me that mothers come from a different planet, and if she was correct, then my mother was a warrior from that planet. And now that my mother is older, the history that is her face is beginning to look like a worn map. The hills that once were her cheeks now have roads carved into them that tell her secrets. The roots of her hair are starting to shimmer with silver that she colors once she sees 10 or more. She no longer cares for long hair. She says, pelo largo is a young woman's game. In a few years, she will be older than my grandmother ever was.
Thank you, Nikolai Chavez of the Whitestone Farms Training Center in Delta Junction. So as I mentioned a little while ago, we have the pleasure now of hearing from the other 6 finalists with the pieces they prepared for the third round of the competition. And so let's please welcome back Bergen Klut-Painter of Petersburg High School.
I Am the People, the Mob by Carl Sandburg. I am the people, the mob, the crowd, the mass. Do you know that all the great work of the world is done through me? I am the working man, the inventor, the maker of the world's food and clothes. I am the audience that witnesses history. The Napoleons come from me and the Lincolns. They die. And then I send forth more Napoleons and Lincolns. I am the seed ground. I am a prairie that will stand for much plowing. Terrible storms pass over me, I forget. The best of me is sucked out and wasted, I forget. Everything but death comes to me and makes me work and give up what I have, and I forget. Sometimes I growl, shake myself, and spatter a few red drops for history to remember. Then I forget. When I, the people, learn to remember, when I, the people, use the lessons of yesterday and no longer forget who robbed me last year, who played me for a fool, then there will be no speaker in all the world say the name the people, with any fleck of a sneer in his voice or any far-off smile of derision. The mob, the crowd, the mass will arrive then.
Thank you, Bergen Klut-Painter from Petersburg High School. Next, we will hear once again, and let's please welcome back Brenna Keith of West Anchorage High School.
Since There Is No Escape by Sarah Teasdale. Since there is no escape, since at the end my body will be utterly destroyed, this hand I love as I have loved a friend, this body I've tended, wept with, and enjoyed. Since there is no escape, even for me, who love life with a love too sharp to bear, the scent of orchards in the rain, the sea, and hours alone, too still and sure for prayer. Since darkness waits for me, then all the more let me go down as waves sweep to the shore in pride, and let me sing with my last breath. In these few hours of light I lift my head. Life is my lover. I shall leave the dead, if there is any way to baffle death.
Thank you, Brenna Keith of West Anchorage High School. Next, we will hear from Caitlin Greenleaf of the Whitestone Farms Training Center in Delta Junction.
Author's Prayer by Ilya Kaminsky. If I speak for the dead, I must leave this animal of my body. I must write the same poem over and over, for an empty page is the white flag of their surrender. If I speak for them, I must walk on the edge of myself. I must live as a blind man who runs through rooms without touching the furniture. Yes, I live. I can cross the street asking, what year is it? I can dance in my sleep and laugh in front of the mirror. Even sleep is a prayer, Lord. I will praise your madness, and in a language not mine, speak of music that wakes us, music in which we move. For whatever I say is a kind of petition. In the darkest days must I praise.
Thank you, Caitlin Greenleaf of the Whitestone Farms Training Center in Delta Junction. Next, with a third round piece to recite is Mariah McGuire from Homer High School.
Poor Angels by Edward Hirsch. At this hour the soul floats weightlessly through the city streets, speechless and invisible, astonished by the smoky blend of grays and gold seeping out of the air, the dark halftones of dusk suddenly filling the urban sky, while the body sits listlessly by the window, sullen and heavy, too exhausted to move, too weary to stand up or to lie down. At this hour, the soul is like a yellow wing slipping through the treetops, a little ecstatic cloud hovering over the sidewalks, calling out to the approaching night, "Amaze me, amaze me!" While the body sits glumly by the window, listening to the clear summons of the dead, transparent as glass, clairvoyant as crystal. Some nights it is almost ready to join them. Oh, this is a strange, unlikely tethering, a furious grafting of the quick and the slow. When the soul flies up, the body sinks down, and all night, locked in the same cramped room, they go on quarreling, suddenly threatening to leave each other, wordlessly filling the air with the sound of a low, internal burning. How long can this bewildering marriage last? At midnight, the soul dreams of a small fire of stars flaming on the other side of the sky, but the body stares into an empty night sheen, a hollow-eyed darkness. Poor, luckless angels, feverish old loves, don't separate yet. Let what rises live with what descends.
Thank you, Mariah McGuire of Homer High School. Next, we'll hear a third recitation piece from Naomi Tidwell of Ben Eielson Junior Senior High School at Eielson Air Force Base.
About Standing in Kinship by Kimberly Blazer. We all have the same little bones in our foot, 26 with funny names like navicular. Together, they build something strong. Our foot arch a pyramid holding us up. The bones don't get cast when they break. We tape them, one phalange to its neighbor for support. Other things like sorrow work that way too. Find healing in the leaning, the closeness. Our feet have 1/4 of all the bones in our body. Maybe we should give more honor to feet and those tiny but blessed cogs in the world. Communities, the forgotten architecture of friendship.
Thank you very much. And we'll now hear from our last contestant in this round of third piece recitations, Rihanna Proch from the Upstream Learning Center in the Copper River School District.
Piano by B.H. Lawrence. Softly in the dusk, a woman is singing to me, taking me back down the vista of years till I see a child sitting under the piano in the boom of its tinkling strings and pressing the small poised feet of a mother who smiles as she sings. In spite of myself, the insidious mastery of song betrays me, and my heart within me weeps to belong to the old Sunday evenings at home, with winter outside and hymns in the cozy parlor, the tingling piano our guide. So now it is vain for the singer to burst into clamor with the great black piano, appassionato. The glamour of childish days is upon me. My manhood is cast down with the flood of remembrance. I weep like a child for the past.
Thank you, Rihanna Proch of the Upstream Learning Center in the Copper River School District. So those are the final recitations, and very soon here I'll have the pleasure of announcing the runner-up and the winner of the 2022 Alaska Statewide Poetry Out Loud Finals. So the finalists are all wonderful young people. They're among a group of 4.1 million American students who since 2005 have participated in Poetry Out Loud since it was founded by Dana Gioia, who was at that time the chairman of the National Endowment for the Arts. And it's just grown exponentially and become one of the most successful programs our federal arts agency has ever undertaken. 4.1 million students, 68,000 teachers from 17,000 schools and organizations in every state, the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands, Guam, and American Samoa. So this really is a perfect example of how important public investment in the arts is and how much it can reach so many more people than simple private artistic activity. It's a cooperative effort, but I couldn't be more proud than I am to be part of a state arts agency that has been so integrally involved in this wonderful national program. And if you think, oh, an Alaskan going to nationals, could one ever win? Some of you may know this, but Meva Ordaz was a junior at West High School in 2014, and she won the statewide finals, and she went to Washington, D.C. When she was a senior in 2015, she won the statewide finals, and she went to Washington, D.C., and she won. I had the privilege of being there. It was very cool. So I would just be so excited, of course, to be there in person once again. This year, they're going to take place virtually, the finals. But every winner at the state level receives $200 and is registered to compete in the national finals. The state winner's school or sponsoring organization receives $500 for the purpose of poetry books for their school. And maybe it's not books anymore, it could be software, but poetry materials to make sure that the students at that young person's school have enhanced access to poetry in their educational life. The first runner-up in each state receives $100, with $200 for their school or organization for poetry materials. And at the national finals, a total of $50,000 in awards and school organizational stipends is awarded every year. That will be the case this year, even though the finals are going to be taking place virtually in lieu of holding them on site in Washington, D.C. So all 55 state and jurisdictional finalists will participate in the national semifinals that will stream on Sunday, the 1st of May, with the top 9 students advancing to the national finals that will stream on Sunday, the 5th of June. Both the semifinals and the finals will be streamed, and if you go to poetryoutloud.org, you can learn more information about the Poetry Out Loud National Recitation Competition and the national finals. So, we're almost at the end of the show, and I will announce the runner-up and the winner in a moment. But if you're enjoying watching arts programming here on public television, I feel I would be remiss if I didn't mention the Governor's Arts and Humanities Awards. This is another cooperative effort with our friends at the Alaska Humanities Forum and the Alaska Arts and Culture Foundation. We've already announced the winners of this year's Governor's Arts and Humanities Awards, but we've not broadcast the presentation of those awards by Governor Dunleavy to the recipients. That's going to happen on Thursday, the 28th of April. That will go out on KTOO, Alaska Public Media, and 360 North. And we're going to encourage people to have safe viewing parties in their communities so that they can celebrate the recipients of those awards. It's another program celebrating adults, for the most part, who contribute to the wonderful artistic and cultural life of Alaskans. So stay tuned for more information about the Governor's Arts and Humanities Awards, which again we're doing in conjunction with our good friends here at KTOO, Alaska Public Media, 360 North, and public broadcasters across the Great Land. With that, it's time to announce the runner-up and the winner of the 2022 Poetry Out Loud Finals for Alaska. And again, maybe some jazz hands. The runner-up is Madeline Bremer from North Pole High School. And so should the state champion not be able to represent Alaska in the national competition, Madeline will advance to the National Poetry Out Loud competition. And that leaves but one fabulous announcement for me to make. The Alaska State Poetry Out Loud champion for 2022, who will go on to represent our state at the national competition, is Nikolai Chavez of Whitestone Farms Training Center in Delta Junction. So, yay, cutting to him there. Congratulations. Congratulations to all of you. You all did amazing work. I'm so proud to have been part of this presentation this evening, and I am so proud that all of you have shared your talents and your vision and your inspiration with us, your families, your friends, and all Alaskans. Well done. So as we close out this broadcast, I really want to extend my special thanks to all the parents and families of our Alaska Poetry Out Loud finalists and all the Alaska Poetry Out Loud coordinators in 2022. We also, of course, have to remember and to thank once again our friends at the Juneau Arts and Humanities Council for their help. Nancy DeCherney and Amanda Filori, we could not do this without you. The entire team here at KTOO Public Media, especially Paige Sparks, Shelley Delaney, Miko Wilson, Jenna Varney, and Kelly Birkinshaw. I want to thank Laura Forbes, the Arts Education Program Director for the Alaska State Council on the Arts, for her tireless work on this and so many other artistic educational programs that she helps make happen in the most amazing way. Thank you very much, Laura. I want to thank the National Endowment for the Arts, the Poetry Foundation, and all the coaches and judges and other participants for Poetry Out Loud 2022. Congratulations once again to all our state finalists and our Alaska State Poetry Out Loud champion, Nikolai Chavez. Thank you to everyone for watching, and have a good night.
The Alaska State Poetry Out Loud competition is made possible by the Alaska State Council on the Arts, the Juneau Arts and Humanities Council, the National Endowment for the Arts, and the Poetry Foundation.